The monitoring station drifted silently at the edge of the solar system. Its sensors pointed toward the third planet from the sun. Ambassador Kethvar stood before the main display, watching the familiar patterns of light that had remained unchanged for 3,000 years. Earth slept peacefully below its blanket of clouds, showing no signs of the monsters that lived beneath its surface. The Zephyrian diplomat adjusted his breathing apparatus and checked the daily reports. All readings were normal. The orbital defense platforms maintained their silent vigil around Earth, just as they had since the Great Sleep began. The automated systems on the planet's surface continued their work of healing the scars left by humanity's final war. Everything was exactly as it should be. Kethvar had been assigned to this post for 20 years, and his father had held it before him. The job was simple: watch Earth and make sure the humans stayed asleep. It was the most important duty in the galaxy, and the most boring. Nothing ever happened here. Nothing was supposed to happen here. The other species had learned this lesson the hard way. 3 millennia ago, humanity had erupted from their small blue world like a virus spreading through healthy tissue. In just 100 years, they had conquered half the known galaxy. They fought with a fury that terrified even the most warlike races. They created weapons that should not have been possible. They turned entire star systems into battlefields and somehow always found a way to win. The war had ended not with humanity's defeat, but with their withdrawal. One day, the human fleet simply stopped attacking. Their leaders sent a single message to all surviving governments: "We are tired, we are going to sleep. Do not wake us." Then they disappeared into their underground cities, sealed the entrances, and went silent. The surviving alien races had formed the Galactic Concordat with one primary rule: leave humanity alone. Let them sleep. Pray they never wake up. The rule had served them well. Without humanity's constant warfare, the galaxy had flourished. Trade routes opened between former enemies. Art and culture bloomed in systems that had known only battle. New technologies developed for peaceful purposes instead of war. The galaxy had become a better place with humanity asleep. But someone had to watch them. Someone had to make sure they stayed that way. Kethvar turned away from the main display and walked through the station's quiet corridors. The crew was small, just 12 beings from different species, all trained for this single task. They monitored every transmission, every energy reading, every tiny change in the patterns around Earth. Their job was to notice if anything was different, no matter how small. The station's junior technician, Vixthera, was hunched over her console in the communications section. The young Altarian's tentacles moved rapidly across the controls as she processed the daily data streams. She was new to the post, having arrived only 3 months ago, and she still approached her work with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned how routine everything was. "Anything unusual today?" Kethvar asked, though he already knew the answer. Vixthera's eye stalk swiveled toward him. "Nothing significant, sir. The usual automated maintenance signals from the surface installations. Power fluctuations within normal ranges. The orbital platforms haven't moved in." She checked her records. 2 years, 4 months, 16 days. Kethvar nodded. The platforms were one of the most closely watched aspects of Earth's defenses. The massive structures had been built by humanity during their final preparations for sleep. Each one was the size of a small moon and packed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. They moved occasionally, adjusting their positions or conducting maintenance, but these movements followed predictable patterns that had been mapped for centuries. "Sir," Vixthera said, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty. "There is something. Probably nothing important." Kethvar felt a chill run through his breathing apparatus. In his 20 years at this post, he had learned that probably nothing important was the most dangerous phrase in the galaxy when it came to monitoring humanity. "Show me," he said. Vixthera brought up a display showing energy readings from Earth's northern continent. The patterns looked normal to Kethvar's trained eye, but the technician pointed to a small section with one of her tentacles. "Here, sir. This reading appeared 4 days ago. It's very faint and it doesn't match any of the known automated systems." Keithavar studied the display more carefully. The anomaly was subtle, just a slight variation in the background energy levels. It could be anything: a new maintenance routine, a minor equipment failure, even interference from solar activity. But it was different, and different was exactly what they were supposed to watch for. "Have you checked the historical records?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I've gone back 50 years. This pattern has never appeared before." The ambassador felt his heart begin to beat faster. 50 years was nothing in the context of humanity's sleep, but it was longer than most species had been monitoring Earth with their current level of precision. "Run a deep analysis," Keithavar ordered. "Cross-reference with all known human technology patterns, and—" He paused, knowing how his next words would sound. "Prepare a priority communication to the Concordate Council." Vixthera's eye stalks widened. Priority communications were reserved for genuine emergencies. In the 3,000 years since humanity's sleep began, fewer than 20 had been sent. Each one had caused panic throughout the galaxy. "Sir, is that really necessary? It could be a simple system malfunction." Keithavar looked back at the main display showing Earth's peaceful blue sphere. Somewhere beneath those clouds, in cities, buried miles underground, billions of humans lay in artificial sleep, the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever known, dreaming dreams no one could imagine. "The one rule exists for a reason," he said quietly. "We watch for changes because any change could be the first sign of their awakening. If we're wrong, the Council will understand. If we're right and we do nothing—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew the stories of what humanity was capable of when they were awake. Over the next several hours, Vixthera ran every diagnostic she could think of. The energy pattern remained consistent, faint but definitely present, definitely new. It appeared to be coming from deep underground, from the same region where ancient records suggested one of humanity's largest sleep cities was located. As night fell on the monitoring station, Keithavar stood once again before the main display. Earth looked exactly the same as it had that morning, as it had yesterday, as it had for 3,000 years. But something was different now. Something was changing. He thought about his father, who had held this post before him, and his father's father before that. Generations of his family had watched Earth, had helped maintain the peace that humanity's sleep had brought to the galaxy. They had been guardians of a sleeping giant, keepers of the most important secret in known space. The humans had to stay asleep. The galaxy depended on it. Peace depended on it. The survival of every thinking being in their corner of the universe depended on it. But as Keithavar watched the slowly rotating planet, he couldn't shake the feeling that their long vigil was about to come to an end. Something was stirring in the depths of Earth, something that hadn't moved for 3 millennia. The one rule had always been simple: don't wake the humans. The problem was, they might be waking themselves up. 3 months had passed since Vixthera first detected the anomaly, and Ambassador Keithavar had not slept well since. The energy readings from Earth had not only continued, they had grown stronger. What started as a faint signal was now unmistakably clear. Something was happening in humanity's underground cities. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Deep space sensors had picked up brief transmissions in what the computers identified as ancient human languages. The messages were encrypted beyond anything the Concordate could break, but their very existence was terrifying enough. The humans were talking to each other for the first time in 3,000 years. Worse still, the orbital defense platforms had begun to move. Keithavar stood in the emergency council chamber on Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Concordate. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular hall, their various breathing apparatus and translation devices creating a symphony of mechanical sounds. The air was thick with fear scents from a dozen different races. "The movement patterns are deliberate," Keithavar reported to the assembled delegates. Platform 7 Alpha shifted position by exactly 43 degrees over a period of 6 hours. Platform 12 Beta followed 12 hours later with a similar movement. These are not random drift patterns or maintenance adjustments. They are repositioning themselves. A crystalline delegate, her silicon body sparkling in the chamber's lights, spoke through her translation matrix. Perhaps their automated systems are simply updating defensive positions after so many years. That's what we hoped, Kethvar replied. But the new positions create overlapping fields of fire that cover approach vectors that have been undefended for centuries. Someone is actively planning these movements. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. Representatives spoke in their native languages, their fear translating clearly despite the babble of tongues. Everyone knew what this meant. The humans were not just stirring, they were preparing for war. Chancellor Mortek of the Hegemony Council called for order. The old Thraxian had lived through the final years of humanity's last war and bore scars from human weapons that had never fully healed. His voice carried the weight of terrible experience. "We must hear from our expert on human behavior," he announced. "Dr. Zenith, present your analysis." Dr. Zenith was a Mindarian, one of the few species with the mental capacity to study human psychology without going insane in the process. She had spent her entire career analyzing the sleeping giants, trying to understand what made them so uniquely dangerous. Her six-eyed head turned to address the council, and her words carried a chill that made everyone present wish they had never asked. "The evidence suggests that humanity's hibernation was never intended to be permanent," she began. "Analysis of their final communications before the Great Sleep indicates they were not retreating in defeat, but entering a planned recovery period. They called it strategic dormancy in their military terminology." A Venusian delegate's gill slits fluttered nervously. A recovery from what? They had conquered half the galaxy. "Recovery from the effort of conquering half the galaxy," Dr. Zenith replied. "Human military doctrine includes something they call tactical exhaustion theory. The idea that even the most aggressive force needs time to consolidate gains, analyze lessons learned, and prepare for the next phase of operations." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. The implications of her words settled over the delegates like a toxic cloud. "Next phase?" Chancellor Mortek asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Dr. Zenith activated a holographic display, showing human population centers on Earth. Thermal readings indicated massive construction projects beginning in several underground cities, projects that were generating heat signatures visible from space. "We believe the humans have been using their hibernation period for accelerated planning and preparation. Their technology allows for dream state problem solving at incredible speeds. While we have enjoyed 3,000 years of peace, they may have experienced subjective centuries of strategic development." The crystalline delegate's body began to dim with fear. "Are you saying they've been planning their next war while they slept?" "I'm saying they've been planning for whatever comes after their sleep period. Whether that's war depends on what they find when they wake up fully." New information appeared on the displays as Vixthara transmitted the latest sensor readings from the monitoring station. The images showed construction on Earth's moon, massive structures being built with a speed that defied comprehension. In just the past week, human automated systems had constructed facilities that should have taken years to complete. "They're building something," Kethvar reported from the monitoring station via quantum communication. "The construction patterns suggest manufacturing capabilities, but the scale is beyond anything in our records. The main facility is already larger than our biggest shipyards." Chancellor Mortek's scarred face grew darker. "How long until they're fully awake?" Dr. Zenith consulted her data. "Based on the rate of activity increase, we estimate 6 to 8 months before their underground cities begin opening. Full awakening of their population could take another year." "Time enough to prepare defenses?" a delegate asked. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the chamber knew the answer. The combined military forces of the Concordat were designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They had maintained only token defense fleets for 3 millennia. Against humanity's proven military capabilities, they might as well throw stones at stars. "There is another option," Dr. Zenith said quietly. "First contact." The suggestion caused an explosion of protests from around the chamber. Voices rose in every language, but the message was the same. Absolute terror at the idea of deliberately making contact with awakening humans. They made it clear they wanted to be left alone, Chancellor Mortek said. "Violating that wish might trigger the exact response we're trying to avoid." "With respect, Chancellor, they're already awakening on their own schedule," Dr. Zenith replied. "The question is whether we wait to see what they want, or attempt to establish communication while they're still in a transitional state. Ambassador Kethavar's voice crackled through the communication system. I volunteer to attempt first contact. If this goes wrong, better it happen to someone who's already as close to them as possible. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was inevitable. The humans were waking up whether the galaxy wanted them to or not. The only choice was between meeting them as friends or waiting to meet them as enemies. As the council session ended, Chancellor Mortek remained in his seat, staring at the displays showing Earth's blue sphere. He remembered the last war, remembered watching human ships tear through concordant defenses like they were made of paper. He remembered the terrible creativity they showed in finding new ways to kill, the way they turned every disadvantage into an advantage somehow. Most of all, he remembered the relief when they finally went to sleep. Now they were stirring, and the galaxy would soon remember why the one rule existed in the first place. Somewhere in the dark between stars, Chancellor Mortek thought he could hear the sound of humanity stretching, yawning, and opening eyes that had been closed for 3,000 years. The long peace was ending, and nobody knew what would replace it. The message came without warning, cutting through every communication channel in the galaxy simultaneously. It bypassed encryption, ignored firewalls, and appeared on displays from the core worlds to the outer rim colonies. The technology required to accomplish such a feat shouldn't have existed, but there it was, proving once again that humans had a talent for making the impossible routine. Ambassador Kethavar was reviewing first contact protocols when every screen in the monitoring station flickered and displayed the same image. A woman in a military uniform he didn't recognize, sitting in what appeared to be a command center. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes held an intensity that made Kethavar's blood freeze. She spoke in perfect galactic standard, though sensors indicated she was actually speaking in an ancient human language called English. The translation was so perfect it seemed to bypass the mechanical translators entirely and speak directly to the listener's understanding. People of the galaxy, the woman began, her voice carrying across light years as if she were standing in the same room. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Strategic Command. We have slept for 3,000 of your years. We have dreamed, and in our dreams, we have remembered many things. The transmission continued with star charts appearing alongside the Admiral's image. The map showed regions of space beyond the galactic rim, areas that no concordant ship had ever explored. Red symbols marked dozens of locations, moving in what appeared to be a coordinated pattern toward their galaxy. While you have enjoyed the peace our absence brought, we have been watching the space between galaxies. What we found there should concern all of us. The threat we originally expanded to meet has grown stronger during our sleep. It approaches now, and this time, we cannot face it alone. Admiral Chen's image shifted, showing recordings of something that made Kethavar's tentacles curl in instinctive fear. Dark shapes moved through space, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing behind but empty void. Whatever these things were, they treated matter itself as food. These are the Devourers. They come from the space between galaxies, following the gravitational currents that connect galaxy clusters. They have already consumed the Magellanic Clouds and 3 other nearby galaxies. Our projections indicate they will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in 18 standard months. The implications hit Kethavar like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been sleeping from exhaustion or defeat. They had been preparing for something worse than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. The transmission continued as Admiral Chen explained humanity's true purpose during their expansion centuries ago. They hadn't been conquering for territory or resources. They had been building defenses, testing alien technologies, and positioning strategic assets throughout the galaxy for a war that was only now beginning. We apologize for the deception, Admiral Chen said, though her tone suggested the apology was purely formal. But the galaxy needed to grow strong on its own terms, not as subjects of human rule. You needed to develop your own technologies, your own strategies, your own unity. Only as allies could you become what this war will require. Within hours of the transmission, every major government in the galaxy was in emergency session. The Concordant Council reconvened with a speed that would have been impossible under normal circumstances, but nothing about their situation was normal anymore. Dr. Zenith stood before the assembly with new data streaming in from deep space observatories. The readings confirmed humanity's claims about the approaching threat. Something massive was indeed moving through the dark space beyond the galactic rim, and its energy signature matched nothing in any database. Preliminary analysis suggests the Devourers are not a single species but a collective intelligence, she reported. They appear to break down matter at the quantum level and convert it into more of themselves. Each system they consume makes them stronger and more numerous. Chancellor Mortek studied the tactical displays with the eye of a soldier who had survived humanity's last war. The approaching enemy made even human military capabilities seem inadequate by comparison. Can they be fought? He asked. Admiral Chen seems to think so, Dr. Zenith replied. But she's also requested immediate military coordination meetings with all major governments. Humanity apparently has been preparing for this specific threat for over 3,000 years. The first joint meeting took place in the neutral space between Earth and Mars, aboard a massive station that had appeared overnight. The construction was unmistakably human, functional, efficient, and slightly unsettling in its perfection. Ambassador Kethavar led the Concordat delegation, his hands shaking as their shuttle approached the station. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock, and Kethavar was surprised to see that she appeared to be the same age as in her transmission. Human life extension technology had apparently improved during their sleep. She was accompanied by other humans wearing the same unfamiliar military uniforms, their faces bearing the calm confidence of professional soldiers. "Thank you for coming," Admiral Chen said as she led them through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. "I know this is difficult. We spent considerable effort making sure you would fear us, and now we're asking you to trust us." The briefing room contained tactical displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleets in terrifying detail. The enemy forces were vast beyond comprehension, moving through space in formations that stretched across light years. Each individual unit was the size of a small moon, and there were millions of them. "How do we fight something like that?" asked Commander Vextai of the Hegemony Defense Force. Admiral Chen activated new displays showing human military assets hidden throughout the galaxy. Weapon systems disguised as asteroids, manufacturing facilities buried in planet cores, and technologies that had been developing in secret for millennia. "We fight them the way humans have always fought superior enemies," she replied. "We cheat. We break rules they don't know exist. We turn their strengths into weaknesses and find victory in places where victory shouldn't be possible." The planning sessions that followed revealed the true scope of humanity's preparations. They had been building a defensive network throughout the galaxy, using their knowledge of alien psychology to hide it in places no one would think to look. Every major trade route had hidden weapon caches. Every important system had concealed monitoring stations. Every species' technology had been studied and improved upon. But even with all their preparation, Admiral Chen made it clear that victory was far from certain. "The Devourers have consumed 12 galaxies that we know of," she explained. "Each one taught them new tactics, gave them new technologies to absorb, made them more dangerous. We estimate they outnumber us by factors that make the mathematics uncomfortable." "Then how do we win?" Chancellor Mortek asked. Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded everyone present why their species had feared humans in the first place. "We do what they don't expect. We make them face something they've never encountered before, a galaxy that fights back with everything it has, led by a species too stubborn to know when they're beaten." As the meeting ended and the alien delegates prepared to return to their respective governments, Kethavar found himself looking back at Earth through the observation windows. The blue planet looked the same as it had for 3,000 years, but everything had changed. The humans were awake now, and with them came the promise of war on a scale that would dwarf anything the galaxy had ever seen. But for the first time since the crisis began, Kethavar felt something approaching hope. Humanity had surprised the galaxy before with their capacity for impossible victories. Perhaps they could do it again. The first Devourer scout ships arrived 6 months earlier than predicted, emerging from the dark space beyond the rim like nightmares given form. They were not ships in any sense that the galaxy understood. They were living things that had grown in the cold between stars, feeding on the remains of dead galaxies until they became something that shouldn't exist. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, the massive installation that had grown from the moon's surface like a metal fungus. Around her, displays showed the approach of the enemy scouts through the galaxy's outer systems. Each contact was brief. The Devourers would enter a system, consume everything organic within hours, then move on toward the core worlds. "They're probing our defenses," she explained to the assembled alien commanders who had gathered for the emergency briefing. "Testing response times, cataloging our weapons, learning our tactics. This is how they've conquered 12 other galaxies. They study their prey before the real attack begins." Commander Vextai of the Hegemony Forces studied the tactical displays with growing horror. The scout ships were destroying entire civilizations as a side effect of their reconnaissance. Billions of lives snuffed out simply because they happened to be in the way of the enemy's information gathering. "How long before the main force arrives?" asked Chancellor Mortek. 18 months as predicted," Admiral Chen replied. "The scouts are clearing the path and establishing forward bases. When the main Devourer swarm arrives, it will have perfect intelligence about our capabilities and defensive positions." Dr. Zenith, who had been studying the enemy transmissions, looked up from her analysis console. "Admiral, these creatures are not like anything we've encountered. They don't communicate in any way we can understand. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, they don't show any behavior we could call rational. They simply consume. Which is exactly why conventional tactics won't work against them," Admiral Chen said. "The 12 galaxies they destroyed before us tried standard defensive strategies. Fleet engagements, fortified systems, strategic retreats. All of it failed because the Devourers don't fight wars the way we understand them. They fight wars the way a forest fire fights trees." She activated a new display showing the joint training exercises that had been taking place throughout the galaxy. The results were not encouraging. Species that had known peace for 3 millennia struggled to adapt to military thinking. Their weapons were outdated, their tactics were theoretical, and their coordination was chaotic at best. "The good news," Admiral Chen continued, "is that we don't need you to fight like us. We need you to fight like yourselves, but with purpose behind it." Over the following months, as the Devourer scouts continued their systematic destruction of outer rim systems, humanity began revealing the true scope of their preparations. The defensive network they had built was beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. Entire asteroids opened up to reveal weapons platforms. Moons split apart to show massive manufacturing facilities. Space itself seemed to come alive with human technology that had been hiding in plain sight for centuries, but the most shocking revelation came when Admiral Chen took the alien commanders on a tour of Earth's underground cities. The cities were vast beyond comprehension, stretching deep into the planet's crust and connected by transport systems that moved at near light speed. Billions of humans lived and worked in these spaces, but they were not the same species that had gone to sleep 3,000 years ago. "Accelerated evolution," Admiral Chen explained as they walked through corridors lined with beings who looked human, but clearly were not entirely so anymore. "We didn't just sleep during our dormancy period. We improved ourselves, enhanced reflexes, improved cognitive processing, better adaptation to space environments. We've spent 3,000 years becoming what this war requires." The humans they encountered moved with a precision that was unsettling to watch. Their eyes tracked movement with predatory intensity, and they seemed to communicate with each other through subtle gestures and expressions that conveyed complex tactical information instantly. "You turned yourselves into living weapons," Dr. Zenith observed with a mixture of awe and horror. "We turned ourselves into whatever we needed to be to win this war," Admiral Chen corrected. "The Devourers have the advantage of numbers and experience. We needed advantages of our own." The training of joint forces intensified as reports came in from the rim systems. The Devourer scouts were not just consuming organic matter, they were learning from it. Each system they destroyed added to their collective knowledge, making them more dangerous with every victory. Ambassador Keithvar found himself commanding a mixed-species task force aboard a ship that was half human technology and half alien innovation. The combination should not have worked, but somehow it did. Human engineering adapted alien concepts in ways that created something entirely new. Weapons that thought like Mindarians, but struck like Thraxian claws. Shields that flowed like Altarian bioforms, but held firm like crystalline lattices. The first real test came when a full Devourer scouting force entered the Kepler system, a major industrial center that produced ships for the entire hegemony region. Instead of evacuating, the Joint Defense Forces had prepared a trap. The battle began conventionally enough. The Devourer ships entered the system and immediately began consuming the outer planets, growing larger and more numerous as they fed. The defending fleets engaged them in textbook formation, appearing to follow standard tactical doctrine. Then humanity's true strategy revealed itself. The human ships began to fail catastrophically, their reactors overloading and their hulls breaching in ways that should have been devastating defeats. But each failure was carefully calculated. Every explosion sent waves of exotic radiation that disrupted Devourer coordination. Every hull breach released clouds of nanomachines designed to interfere with enemy regeneration systems. The Devourers found themselves fighting an enemy that turned defeat into victory, that used destruction as a weapon, that somehow became more dangerous the more damage they took. "You're using your own ships as ammunition," Commander Vextai observed with amazement as he watched the tactical displays. "We're using everything as ammunition," Admiral Chen replied from her command position. "The Devourers expect their enemies to try to preserve their assets. They don't know how to fight opponents who are willing to sacrifice everything for a strategic advantage." The battle lasted 14 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer scout force. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Nearly 60% of the defending fleet was destroyed, and the Kepler system itself was left scarred and barely habitable. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the wreckage, Dr. Zenith asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Admiral, if this is what it costs to defeat a scouting force, how can we possibly survive the main attack?" Admiral Chen stood at the observation window, looking out at the debris field that had once been one of the galaxy's most important systems. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a face that carried the weight of impossible decisions. "We survive by making sure they never get the chance to use their full strength against us," she said. "The main attack will come through predictable entry points from intergalactic space. We're going to meet them there in the dark between galaxies, and we're going to show them what happens when they try to devour something that bites back." The plan she outlined in the days that followed was so audacious, it bordered on madness. Humanity intended to take the war to the Devourers before they could fully enter the galaxy. They would collapse strategic stars to create gravitational weapons, turn entire systems into traps, and fight a mobile campaign in the cosmic void where no sensible species would dare to venture. It was exactly the kind of impossible strategy that had made humanity so feared during their last war. The difference was that this time, they weren't fighting alone. As the combined fleets prepared for the most desperate gamble in galactic history, Ambassador Kethavar found himself remembering the simple monitoring station where this all began. The one rule had been about keeping humanity asleep to preserve the peace. Now they were awake and the peace was ending. But perhaps if they were very lucky and very brave, they could build something better in its place, a galaxy that had learned to fight for itself, guided by the most dangerous guardians the universe had ever produced. The stars themselves began to die according to humanity's plan. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of her flagship as the first strategic star collapsed into a controlled black hole, sending gravitational waves rippling across several light-years of space. The artificial singularity would serve as both a weapon and a navigation beacon, forcing the approaching Devourer swarms into predictable approach vectors. "Collapse successful," reported Commander Zhang, one of the enhanced humans who served as Chen's tactical coordinator. "Gravitational field is stable and tracking as projected. The enemy will have to enter the galaxy through the Sagittarius corridor if they want to avoid the gravity wells." Around the command ship, the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Human vessels moved alongside Zephyrian cruisers, Thraxian battleships, and crystalline carriers in a formation that should have been impossible to coordinate. But the 3 years of joint training had created something new, a truly galactic military force that combined the best aspects of every species' approach to warfare. Ambassador Kethavar stood at his position aboard the command ship, watching the tactical displays with a mixture of awe and terror. The scope of the battle they were about to fight defied comprehension. The Devourer main swarm had finally arrived at the galactic rim, and their numbers made the scout forces look like a minor patrol. "Contact," announced the sensor operator, a young Altarian whose tentacles danced across controls designed by 6 different species. "Devourer Vanguard is entering sensor range. Estimated count," "Admiral, there are too many to count accurately." The main display shifted to show the approaching enemy. What appeared at first to be a star field resolved into individual ships as the sensors achieved better resolution. Each Devourer vessel was the size of a small planet, and they moved in formations that stretched across entire solar systems. They had grown fat on the remains of 12 consumed galaxies, and they approached with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. "All units, implement Protocol Omega," Admiral Chen announced across the fleet communications. "Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to show them that some prey is too dangerous to swallow." The first phase of the battle began exactly as planned. The human ships advanced in what appeared to be a standard formation, drawing the Devourers into the carefully prepared kill zone between the artificial black holes. The alien components of the fleet held back, appearing to be a reserve force waiting for orders. The Devourers took the bait perfectly. Their lead element surged forward, eager to consume the approaching human vessels and add their technology to the collective swarm. They had done this same maneuver countless times in 12 different galaxies, and they expected the same result. Instead, they encountered humanity's gift for impossible solutions. The human ships didn't just explode when overwhelmed. They unraveled in ways that violated the basic laws of physics. Matter-antimatter reactions cascaded through dimensions that shouldn't exist, creating tiers in spacetime that pulled Devourer vessels into pocket universes designed specifically as traps. Phase 2. "Execute," Admiral Chen ordered, as the first wave of Devourers found themselves fighting battles in spaces where the fundamental forces worked differently than in normal reality. The alien fleets revealed their true purpose as support weapons for humanity's assault. Crystalline ships projected energy fields that amplified the dimensional tiers. Thraxian vessels fired projectiles that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Zephyrian cruisers generated temporal distortions that aged Devourer ships into dust in minutes. Each species contributed their unique capabilities to a strategy that no single race could have conceived or executed alone. The battle became a symphony of controlled destruction, with humanity conducting an orchestra of alien talents in service of victory through impossible means. But the Devourers were learning, adapting, evolving their tactics in real time. The collective intelligence that drove them began to understand the nature of the trap and started developing counters to humanity's dimensional weapons. They're adapting faster than projected, Commander Zhang reported. "Estimate 12 hours before they develop full immunity to our primary weapons." Admiral Chen had expected this. The Devourer's ability to learn and adapt was what had made them so successful against the other galaxies. But humanity had prepared for this too. "Initiate final protocol," she announced. "All ships prepare for close engagement." What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as either the most heroic or the most insane military decision ever made. The human ships abandoned all pretense of conventional tactics and dove directly into the heart of the Devourer swarm, not to escape or to inflict damage, but to be consumed. Each human vessel that was devoured by the enemy carried a payload of nanomachines, exotic matter and information weapons designed to spread through the Devourer collective like a virus. Instead of being destroyed, humanity was infiltrating the enemy from the inside, using their own consumption against them. The Devourers found themselves fighting a war where victory became defeat, where consuming their enemies made them weaker instead of stronger, where every successful attack brought them closer to their own destruction. "It's working," Dr. Zenith reported from her analysis station. "The Devourer collective is fragmenting. They're losing coordination across the entire swarm." The battle reached its climax near the galactic core, where Admiral Chen executed the most dangerous gambit in human military history. Using the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's center, she triggered a controlled gravitational pulse that sent waves of destruction through the Devourer formation. The pulse nearly destroyed the galaxy to save it, but it worked. The Devourer swarm, already weakened by humanity's infiltration tactics, shattered like glass under the gravitational assault. The surviving elements fled back toward intergalactic space, carrying with them the knowledge that this galaxy was too dangerous to consume. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the wreckage of the greatest battle in galactic history, the true cost became clear. Humanity had sacrificed nearly 70% of their species to achieve victory. Entire worlds were empty now, their populations having volunteered for the suicide missions that made triumph possible. Ambassador Kethvar found Admiral Chen in the medical bay of her flagship, receiving treatment for radiation exposure from the gravitational weapons. She looked older now, as if the battle had aged her decades in the span of days. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. Admiral Chen looked out through the medical bay's viewport at the slowly spinning galaxy they had saved. Peace was returning, but it was a different kind of peace than before. The species of the galaxy had learned to fight together, to depend on each other, to think as a unified civilization instead of scattered individual races. "Ask me in 1,000 years," she said, "when we know what kind of galaxy we've built with this victory." The Galactic Concordat reformed in the months that followed, but it was no longer a council of separate species trying to avoid conflict. It was a true government representing a unified galactic civilization, with humanity serving as its military guardians and strategic planners. The one rule changed too. Where it had once been "don't wake the humans," it became something new. When the stars themselves are threatened, wake the humans. They'll find a way to save us all. Ambassador Kethvar returned to his monitoring station, but his job was different now. Instead of watching Earth to make sure humanity stayed asleep, he watched the space between galaxies, alert for signs of new threats that might require humanity's unique talents for impossible solutions. Sometimes, late at night in the quiet of space, he could feel the presence of the sleeping giants in their underground cities, but it was a different kind of sleep now. Not the exhausted hibernation of a species recovering from war, but the patient rest of guardians who knew they might be needed again. The galaxy was safer now, protected by creatures who had proven they could win wars that couldn't be won, defeat enemies that couldn't be defeated, and find victory in places where victory shouldn't exist. But in the dark spaces between the stars, other things stirred and dreamed of conquest. And when they came, they would learn the same lesson the Devourers had learned, that some prey is too dangerous to hunt, and some guardians never truly sleep. The humans were awake now, and the universe was a more dangerous place for anyone who threatened the worlds they had claimed to protect. The stars themselves had seen what humanity could do when fully roused to war, and they quivered.